All right.
Awesome.
Well, thank you to everyone for joining today. This is Story Space, and I'll just quickly introduce myself and what this is before we get going. And I'll just say that we will have a little bit of time at the end for those of you who are in the audience, as it were, if you want to come on screen and ask any questions or have any comments at the end. We'll have a little bit of time reserved for that. So stick around, and you just need to put your hand up, or which I think you just do at the bottom of your screen. It'll let you do a little hand, and then I know you want to come on screen and let you on. So I'm Brianna, Brianna Wiens, and myself and Sean Enns, we have put this event together. I am an actor and a director and a writer and a producer of theater and film. I live in Nanaimo on Vancouver Island, but I spent lots of time in Vancouver, and I was born on the island, so I'm happy to be back. Sean is in Nanaimo as well. I'll let you intro yourself, Sean. How about that?
Sure. I'm Sean. I am a playwright and a director, among other things. And yeah, I was born in Chemainus. No, I was born in Alert Bay, but I grew up in Chemainus. And from like, I don't know, 75 to 91 or something, and then moved to Nanaimo in 1992. And I've been here ever since. So I'm an island boy as well. And I am putting this on with Brianna, and just happy to be around creative people that want to tell stories, because I think, I don't know, I just need them right now. I need to hear from other people.
Yeah.
I need those voices coming in, because I'm kind of, and you're so used to hearing other people's stories and having the chance to just interact with other people. So I'm really starved for it now. So I'm really happy to bring this together and to be able to connect and hear from all of you wonderful people.
Yeah, here. So I just have a question here. Sean, do you see that question? Are you able to answer it? Okay, thank you. Can I multitask? The answer is no. Yeah, just a little bit more on what Sean said. I mean, the spark for this event, we met earlier in the year and discussed doing an event. This was maybe in January, so before we were all isolated, and doing a storytelling event, which we would live stream or something like that. Because as Sean and I both connect on our shared desire to lose the stigma around mental illness and how that, the many forms that it takes. Something that Sean brought to my attention was those people who want to be involved and connected, especially in the arts or live performance, but often can't or are unable to leave the house. So that's sort of what sparked this idea of doing a live event, but streaming it. And then, of course, we were all put in isolation. And so here we are. We thought it was a good time to do this. I know for me, why I'm driven to do theater and this sort of thing is the connection. It is the community aspect of it. As well as storytelling. I just am completely lit up by hearing people's stories, and none more than when I hear someone's real story and experiences. I just think, I mean, it connects us. I don't know who said it first because I've seen many renditions of it, but the quote about people are hard to hate close up, and hearing people's stories, getting to know them, actually taking a moment to understand someone and what they've gone through, I think is universally something we could all use right now. So I feel really happy to have these 6 storytellers on board. And I think we should just get to it and hear their stories. The theme that we gave everyone was belonging, which we left intentionally sort of vague to hear how people took it. And yes, that here we will hear it. So let me start by introducing our first storyteller, Marjorie Stewart. Marjorie is a Nanaimo resident, and she's been an activist for over 50 years, or she also describes herself as a community shit disturber, which I quite liked. She has an incredible list of achievements, some which I will note. She was on the board of Canadian Council for International Cooperation, Canadian Voice of Women for Peace. She chaired Mid-Island Family Caregivers Network, Global Village in Nanaimo, which focuses on fair trade, and Nanaimo Food Share, which is about food security. She's currently a part of Age Friendly Nanaimo on behalf of Nanaimo Food Share, which is a city initiative that addresses social isolation in seniors. And I will turn it over to Marjorie.
Well, thank you. My goodness, I'd forgotten half these things. So I'm going to jump right in with the word belonging, because I imagine that most of us started thinking, what do I mean by belonging? And I finally figured out that I mean several things by belonging, some of them good, some of them not so good. You know, there's the sort of warm, fuzzy feeling about being accepted, being within, being in a place where you belong, which is kind of nice. And then there's Maslow's hierarchy, which places that sort of third on the scale. After basic needs and security comes belonging. And then you tend to get a bit crotchety and say, well, belonging implies ownership. It implies ownership of space. Sometimes it implies ownership of people. And so I think what I finally came around to was, where do I feel at home? Because there's no negative connotation there. So I'm going to jump right in and tell you a story about myself, because I understand we don't have to speak for the whole 10 minutes, but it's quite likely I will have that tendency. About 30 years ago, I was sitting in Pearson Airport in Toronto waiting for a change of planes, and a small entourage came strolling through. And the entourage consisted of a very beautiful young woman of Asian background and 2 or 3 rather sycophantic youngish men hanging around her. And I was startled that something really dark and nasty and spiteful welled up inside me. Something inside me said, who the hell does she think she is? And I thought, oh, that's out of the middle of me, and I don't really like that attitude very much. Where did it come from? So I thought about it a bit then and over the next little while, and I decided that there were 2 reasons that I was angry. One was that I was now in my 50s and no longer in my more nubile phase. So I was kind of angry that she was doing well for herself because she was so young and fresh and beautiful. And the other was because she was Asian. And I've always felt I belonged wherever I was. I grew up in Scotland. I grew up in a big city. I've never felt I didn't belong anywhere I was, because I've always had the privilege of being on the privileged colonial side of the fence. So when I grew up in the city of Glasgow, it was all what we used to call white bread. There were coloured people at the university when I went to the university, but they went away again. And I don't think they had a very good time, a lot of them, particularly the black people, because some of those stone-faced Scottish landladies were pretty hard to take, even if you were part of the inner colonial group. So I realized that this was me recognizing a puddle of nasty racism inside myself. So I started thinking about that and reflecting on it and working on it over time. And in hindsight, I think I've been able to identify when that ugly exclusionist aspect pops up in my personality. I think it goes right back to the tribe. And I think there are good things and bad things about the tribe. It's very nice to feel you belong. And I must say, I've had a really easy ride of it through life. As I said, I've always felt I belonged. Belonging was easy. Belonging wasn't a problem. It's become more interesting as I meet more of a mix of races because, as I said, when I grew up, my country of Scotland was all the same kind of people. Terrifying to think of, really. But when I came to Canada, I started getting more of a mix of people. And I got a mix of religions too, because I taught for the Protestant School Board of Greater Montreal, which means everybody who isn't Catholic. The town was split, just like my hometown of Glasgow was split between the two major Christian religions. And by the time I arrived in Nanaimo, for the very first time, some of my friends were Catholic, which was really interesting to me because we had kind of a different take on certain values and certain things, and very similar takes on other things. And then I just want to tell you, I want to finish now because I think there are a lot of interesting discussion will come out of what we're saying. This morning, I got the Tyee in my inbox, and one of the articles was about the Chinese in Vancouver, in Richmond. And I remember driving some friends to the airport some years ago, and we suddenly realized that we should have ourselves some lunch before people were subject. In those days, planes fed you before people were subject to airport food or airplane food. And we couldn't find a place in Richmond, which I thought was an English-speaking city already, that wasn't Chinese. And we accidentally went into a place where it said English spoken. And it turned out English wasn't spoken. And that was a jolt to our Scottish supremacist sense of belonging. The waitresses and the people were quite confused that we were in there, four of us sitting around a table. So all they did was completely ignore us because obviously none of them spoke English. So we finally figured that out and trailed out and crossed the street and found another place, perfectly nice place where they did speak English and were quite happy to feed us a light lunch. But in the Tyee this morning, they were talking about how Chinese Richmond is. And I was wondering how that feels to people who were born and grew up in Vancouver, because it's startling when you find yourself surrounded by people. You're not just a tourist, you're not just a visitor, it's in your own home territory. And you're surrounded by people who think differently and have different experiences and maybe don't think that you belong. And the more I thought about the Richmond experience, the more I realized that I sort of expect people to stop being whatever they were before. Because when I became an accidental Canadian by marrying a Canadian, the first thing I did was take out Canadian citizenship, and it was easy in those days. So I took out the citizenship and I thought, well, now I'm a Canadian and my loyalty is to Canada. And I was quite surprised reading the article to find out that many of the Chinese in Richmond, people of Chinese upbringing, still feel very strongly Chinese and still keep very strong connections to that part of China that they feel loyal to. And suddenly it reminded me of the people who came to the British Isles after the Second World War when I was a child. And the Russians were all what we call white Russians. They were anti-communists who had left and who were in mourning for the Russia they used to know. And so I'm thinking, at what point do people start to become belonging in the place where they're earning a living? And at what point do they cut ties from where they come? So I'm going to leave what I have to say right there. I think I talked for nearly 10 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Marjorie.
End of story. End of story.
Thank you so much. Yeah, wow, lots to think about there, certainly. That it has reminded me of some reading that I've done, or stories that I've heard about people coming to Canada and the choice to keep their given name or to change their name to a Canadian or a white name, and the struggle with that choice. So thank you for sharing very much. And we'll come back to everyone's stories at the end, certainly, but I will move on to our next storyteller, who is Mark Primer, and we'll just switch over. I think Sean's working on something in the background there, I hope. So Mark is a poet and a baker, and together with his wife, he operates Well Bread Bakery in Chemainus, BC, which is on Vancouver Island, and the bakery is in its 10th year. He regularly performs at a writer's gathering at the Duncan Showroom, which is a venue in Duncan, BC, also on the island. It's called For the Love of Words. And he prefers sharing his poems with customers and friends rather than publishing. And he's gained notoriety in his community for doing so. So thank you so much, Mark, and I will pass it over to you.
Hi, it's interesting because as much as I have sort of written down what it is that I was going to say, just listening to Marjorie made me think of when I started out baking years ago. I think most places that I went, I always felt like I didn't belong. I would do things that were sort of against the grain, and I would get in trouble with my superiors, and it was I think the first time I finally got to a spot where I felt like I belonged was I was downtown Edmonton, and I was with a business partner, and we were at we had a small bake shop called Scopex, and there was such a strong sense of community. I mean, these were artists, they were writers, designers, graphic designers, all these different folks, and they were my people. And I think I probably knew 300 names of different customers. So when they would walk in the door, I would say, even if the guy hadn't been by for 6 weeks, I'd say, "Hey, Brian, how are you doing? Where have you been?" And it was that was my first taste of belonging, I think, really. Although my business partner and I were not getting along, and so a year later, we broke that off. But in regards to what Marjorie had said, one of the customers that I had was a guy named George Alagan. You talk about people and their stories and connecting. I mean, that's my lifeblood. I can talk to anybody for 20 minutes, at least. And after that, I can decide whether I want to spend more time talking with them. But George Alagan and Paul Hastings were a gay couple, designers. And George was from the Philippines, and through the years I've gotten to know a little bit more about George. I'm not close to George, but we've gone out several times and had dinner together. And I had been out on one occasion. I'd been out to the theater the night before And this relates to something Marjorie had said. There was a group of Asian guys that came in, and they sat down in front of me. They had a white girl between the two of them, and they were, they had their tech devices, and they were just so uber cool. And I felt such a degree of contempt towards them. And I mentioned this to George the next day when I had lunch with him. And George had an interesting perspective, because George, the thing about George is George grew up not knowing just how wealthy a family he came from. He came from the Philippines. He used to play with Imelda Marcos's daughter. I hope that everyone here knows who Imelda Marcos and the Marcoses were. George said, when you come from so much wealth, it's really hard to have a sense of identity. And so George did give me a picture toward, or a view towards some of these very wealthy young Asians that I felt such contempt towards, which is that they were just really having a hard time finding themselves. Because as George explained, George had to leave the Philippines to find himself, because when you come from such wealth, even if you do well, people look at you and say, you've done well because of dad. So I don't know, that was just one of the things that Marjorie's piece brought up. But here's what I have to say about belonging. I wrote a poem about it, belonging. I'm trying to unpack belonging, and what comes to mind is that belonging is the thing I mostly never get to. Substitute belonging with be-longing, and you would see I am more often moving towards or moving away from belonging, and that there are a lot of areas in my life concerning love, intimacy, oneness, relationship with God, where the theater seats are empty. Belonging is walking in the forest, feeling I am a part of it, outside my head, rooted with every step. Belonging is crying during lovemaking, my soul exposed, is sitting with friends who it seems fill my emptiness, because much of the time it seems I can't know myself without first forming a committee. So perhaps that's one of the explanations of why I so much enjoy talking to other people and getting glimpses of their stories, is because I feel like I'm almost trying to understand myself through them and through their experiences. Because sometimes I don't feel like, there's always a tension there in terms of I don't, on some level, I don't want to belong. I'm quite satisfied doing my own thing. I never fit within the system of, baking for supermarkets. When I finally ended up down at the farmer's market, I got to do all this crazy shit that you could never do at an in-store, and not get in trouble for it. I'd have people eat it up instead. So I think to find people who can get you, but yet still, there's this distance. That's it.
Thank you, Mark. That was beautiful. Thank you for sharing. It reminds me, there's the push-pull to be, like you said, do your own thing, go against everything, versus feel that you belong to something or someone. And it just made me think of, I don't know what it is, but there's something that says you become the 5 people you spend the most time with or are influenced by. I think Mark froze. but we'll say thank you. And hopefully he pops back. And move on to our next storyteller, who is Jonathan Hamilton. And we'll just switch over here. There he is. So Jonathan is an actor and a writer, as well as a climbing gym owner in Nanaimo, BC, on Vancouver Island as well. He's spent a great deal of his life in the mountains, climbing them and exploring the wild. The story that that you're about to hear, he wrote for a production called Be a Man, which was a play written by a group of men in Nanaimo, exploring the theme of toxic masculinity and what it means to be a man. And that was a couple years ago with Kismet Theatre. So in the story, he takes us to India, where he spent the first 10 years of his life. And with that, I will pass it on over.
Thanks, Brianna. Oof, belonging. That's a big one for me. Something I constantly crave in my life, and something I fight at the same time as well. You know, I want to belong with people. I crave that connection, but again, I just want to be myself, and I'm going to do whatever I want because that's who I am. So there's this constant battle, but that craving for human connection always ends up winning out. So yeah, I grew up in India, in a completely different culture, and there's so many things and places and people that I just felt so completely connected to in that life. And it was such an incredible change moving back to Canada as a 10-year-old and trying to fit into North American culture, a culture that I didn't understand, I didn't really know much about. And now 30 years on, living in Canada, I feel like I'm slowly starting to gain that connection and find who I am in this culture and find that feeling of belonging. So let me tell you a little bit about how all of that started. Blonde hair flowing in the wind, dirty bare feet gliding across the dirt and moss, dust and sweat filling my nostrils. I push my wiry little body to go faster and faster. The crashing sound of bending and breaking branches above me got closer and closer. The blood pumping through my body was as hot as the sun above my head. Time slowed as I made it up the last few rough rock steps and onto the safety of the porch. The screeching rhesus monkeys held back at the edge of the yard. A smile crept onto my face. Success. One more day, I didn't need to pull out my slingshot to defend myself from these pests. The fear and excitement flowing through my veins slowed and transmuted into peace and contentment. Time for a snack, said my mom. Safe. Standing in front of the living room window with a peanut butter and banana chapati roll-up in my left hand and a glass bottle of Maza mango juice in my right, I stared off into the afternoon haze. The rhododendrons and pine trees lazily swayed in the breeze. In that moment, everything in my world was okay. It was more than okay. I thought I was Indian. I knew I looked different, and sometimes people treated me different, but I felt accepted and loved. I grew up in a culture that often values family and community, a culture that cared about me, a culture that would welcome you or me or anyone into their home 5 minutes after meeting you and feed you the last meal in their cupboard. Nonetheless, it was mayhem trying to move through this beautiful swath of humanity, navigating the throngs of people, slipping and sliding, fitting through the holes that appeared. No space went unused. The throngs of people moved like water, and we just had to go with the flow. A beautiful dark blue 1968 Royal Enfield motorcycle was the way we've moved through the world. I would ride on the gas tank of this magical growling beast, my little fingers wrapped tightly around the steel handlebars, my big white helmet swaying to and fro like one of those dashboard bobbleheads. My dad with his strong hands on the controls, my mother sitting behind him with my little sister in a backpack on her back. this precious mass of my little family, so exposed in this fast-flowing world. One blisteringly hot day, we were zipping along through the countryside from village to village. Every corner we went around, a new smell or sight would fill my mind and ignite my curiosity. With horn blaring, we would pass slow-moving ox carts with tottering loads of sugarcane. Giant trucks with their horns blaring would zoom past us with maybe only a foot or two to spare on either side. We would go left and then back right. There were no lanes on the road, no rules, but somehow everything just worked. For the most part, anyways. We came around a corner and the sound of the bang reverberated in my helmet. Shreds of the blown front tire flew by my face. "Hold on," my dad yelled as he guided the now uncontrollable roaring monster off the road into a grassy field. The four of us flew off the bike in a synchronized slow motion crash dance. The smell of rubber and grass and gasoline assaulted my nostrils immediately and simultaneously. Before I knew what had happened, I was being picked up and dusted off by a smiling stranger. The blue Royal Enfield was quickly wheeled away to a nearby mechanic, somehow completely unscathed, other than having a mild run-in with a patch of rogue stinging nettles. My family and I were pronounced healthy by a local doctor who'd also come running. In less than 5 minutes, we were all sipping chai and eating samosas at a nearby shop. Everyone nearby crowded around and listened intently while I reenacted the crash with my little red dinky car. Everything had happened and nothing had happened. We were taken care of. That's just how it was. Maybe it had a little to do with the fact that we were different, or maybe not. Maybe it was because we were as Indian as the rest of them. Regardless of what had happened, I just knew that things were okay. This beautiful and connected existence came to a crashing halt. I stepped off the plane in Vancouver and walked out into a completely different world. The feeling of belonging quickly faded away. Unsmiling faces refused to look me in the eye. People sat in front of huge TVs and didn't talk to each other. I didn't understand this way of living. In the small Vancouver Island town that became my new home, I blended in easily, yet the kids still looked at me funny, like I was an alien, like I was different. I didn't understand. I missed my slingshot and the monkeys and the smells and the sounds and the smiling faces of home. Still gets me choked up thinking about that. All of those smells and sounds are so close in my memory, and it's lovely. Anyway, thanks for listening.
Thank you. I'm not crying, you're crying. That's really beautiful. Thanks, Jonathan. Next up, we have Krista Uppenell. Oh, I can hear myself. That's not good. There we go. So Krista is our next storyteller. Krista lives in Vancouver, and she works in death care, serving families during some of the most difficult times of their lives. She moved into this field well into her midlife. She exchanged a 6-figure income, complete with a corner office, for an apprentice salary and a cubicle, and she wouldn't have it any other way. Her vocational pivot has allowed her to explore both the strength and the vulnerability that comes from embracing inexpertise. And she says in her own words that she loves going to work every day. So thank you so much, Krista, for being here, and I will pass it over to you.
Thank you, Brianna. I really appreciate that. Thanks for having me here today. You know, how are you doing is actually not the first question we usually ask each other. It seems to be, oh, and what do you do? And I just think that is so telling. You know, you're at a cocktail party, or you've met a friend, or you've met this group here, you know, and your default, our societal default is, and what do you do? And, you know, 3 years ago, I had a really, really great answer to that question. Like, I had a great answer to that question, because I had this job that was this endless escalator, you know, bigger salaries and more promotions and a bigger corner office and more opportunities to travel. And I had this level of perceived expertise in my field, and people would seek me out to have me speak on at events or this kind of thing, right? So there was this understanding of me in this, you know, very small pond of being an expert. And I think that what happened is that I confused my sense of importance, because of this very important job, with a sense of self. And I think that these really fancy, you know, the great title and the great salary and all that, I think this allowed me to push down and push away just how much I hated that job. I hated it. I hated it. My values were misaligned with the company's values. And every day I used to wake up and think, oh God, no, I can't go to work today. But I kept going to work, and I couldn't keep doing it anymore. And so one day I didn't, and I quit. And 47 years old, you know, and I guess that's a pretty classic age for a midlife crisis. I quit without something to go to, but I had been thinking for probably close to 20 years about something that I wanted to go to. Something that I was actually really afraid to talk about, and something that I was afraid to say out loud. I was afraid to answer the question, what do you do with this particular answer? And also at 47, you know, I thought, oh, everybody else, they're going to have been working for so long, they're all going to be experts, and I won't be. And the other thing was that every time I looked at how to do this thing that I had been thinking about for close to 20 years and wanting to do, every time I looked, it was the same answer, right? It was 2 years of school, it was a 2-year apprenticeship, and it was an apprentice's salary, which, let me tell you, is not a 6-figure salary. And there is no corner office, right? So I was 47. And I had all these like short-term gigs lined up because, you know, I was an expert, and people wanted me to write their stuff for them. And it was fine. I could just float. But I was happy to wake up every morning because I wasn't going to that work anymore. But I wasn't being truthful about what I wanted to do. And it was all fear-based. It really was. So I turned 48 and I signed up for funeral school, and I found an apprenticeship, and like I took science classes even. And I discovered this sense of belonging as a funeral director. And I think that this discovery, I think that it comes in no small part because of my inexpertise, right? This sense of belonging actually allowed me to think about different types of belonging and how we belong to each other, something Marjorie said earlier, and who we belong to and who belongs to us was all of a sudden in my head, right? And I was no expert. Like, I was not good at ordering flowers or raising arteries or sitting in arrangement rooms or cleaning the hearse or anything like that. I was really actually not very good at that at all. And I certainly wasn't good at walking beside families, literally walking beside them as they held and carried their dead from one place to their final place. I wasn't good at that either. But I started to get okay at some of it, and I started to get better at it. And as I did get better, I started to see this evidence of these different types of belonging. And I saw that evidence in a space, a societal space that does everything it can, like everything it can, to make death not belong, to keep death away, to make sure death has no place. Like, think about this, right? general public, members of the general public, we cannot go into a morgue. We wouldn't even know where the morgue is really in a local hospital or whatever, right? Almost all of us, any general public member. But if we did know, if we found out, and if we somehow gained access to it, we would have to go by the transfer area, the recycling area, the garbage area to get to that morgue. When people die, they don't know what to do. When people lose someone, they don't know what to do. And the call I most frequently get, the way the call starts is, someone I love has died and I don't know what to do next. And you know what? People, like, this is the one thing that we all have in common. This is the one thing that we all belong to and belongs to all of us. And yet we don't know what to do or where to start when it does happen. So, you know what, against this backdrop, it didn't matter so much that I wasn't much of an expert, right? So that was calming, at least. And in our society today, we've forgotten this one major point of belonging that I see, that I'm so privileged to see now all the time. And that's this idea of who we belong to and who belongs to us. And it doesn't take an expert to see that we belong, right? And our dead, they very much belong to us. Death is amazing feature. Death is this incredible, important that is as important and meaningful and beloved, or could be every bit as our living mentors. 2 years ago, you know, I had kind of lost track of myself. I had confused what I did and how other people valued that with who I was. And I had become such an expert at work, at least, that actually I had stopped learning things. And in what could have been, I could have had a midlife crisis, but I realized actually what happened is I had this midlife discovery, and I actually created a new answer to that question. What do you do? And I get to say now, oh, I'm a 50-year-old apprentice. I'm a 50-year-old apprentice funeral director. It actually changes the course of the conversation most of the time, to tell the truth. So, you know, I think that I want to invite you and, like, all of us, I want to invite everyone to think of themselves as belonging to this club. Like, I belong to this amazing club, not of 50-year-old apprentices, but and that's actually a pretty cool club, I've discovered now. But this other club that I belong to is the club of people who will die one day. And I would love to invite you, I would like to invite everyone to embrace their own inexpertise with that concept, but embrace the fact that they are an honored member of this amazing club, and to imagine, to just dare to imagine what you could learn from this incredible teacher, Death. So thank you.
Thank you, Krista. Thanks so much. I love ending with an invitation. It's lovely. Yeah, beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah, there's so much I want to unpack every time, and we'll just move on to the next storyteller. And as I said, we can discuss things at the end. So next up we have Madison Schmidt. Madison is originally from Vancouver Island, but he's been living in Montreal working as a bilingual waiter and restaurant manager for the last 5 years. He had an affinity for horror films growing up, which perhaps led to him working in the arts as an actor, a singer, a musical director, and a director of theater. his inspiration for today's story has come from his recent exploration of his own family history and curiosity about the history of places and names. So without further ado, I will pass it over to Madison.
Thanks, Brianna. So, hello from Montreal, everybody. It's hot here right now. I would like to acknowledge that here in Montreal, I'm on the unceded territories of the St. Lawrence Iroquois, the Mohawk, the Huron-Wendat, and the Haudenosaunee people. My father was adopted, and like many Métis children, experienced an eradication of his traditional culture. Our family has recently been making an effort to connect again, or for the first time. I've been inspired by the thought that it is never too late to change. And this is an attempt at creating culture through performance and at healing trauma for the next generations. Sleep, little baby, now, sleep while you can, 'cause the ghosts won't come till you're older. There's a tale of one Marguerite, and when she was as young, she would rest her head on her darling grand-mère, just as you are. The old woman would tell her that she came du Sud-Est, somewhere out there beyond the Great Lakes. Her name was Nantouche, of the Raven Clan people, and their ways were truly ancient indeed. Sleep, little baby, now, sleep while you can, 'cause the ghosts won't come till you're older. She would speak of her husband, dear Marguerite's grandfather, a Scotsman who was named Sir James Hughes. Sir James Hughes was the son of a British town major who for 50 long years watched over old Montreal. There's a story, American soldiers once held it, but they honored and respected the old Scottish man. One autumn day when Marguerite was a teenager, her mother would tell her of her brother, Guy Hughes. Guy, as you see it, had been murdered by a local tribe way, way out west, out past the Rocky Mountains. Nantouche would remember with a feigned dumb indifference in a place she would each time call Old Fort St. John. Sleep, little baby, now, sleep while you can, 'cause the ghosts won't come till you're older. You see, the young Guy Hughes had kidnapped a woman and was abandoning his post in the lands of her people. He had been left alone by his 3 fellow trappers who were left at the fort at the end of their term. They were on their way back when he was killed in his room, where the blood stains the floor to this day, she would say. And the other 3 men soon met the same fate. Sleep, little baby, now, sleep while you can, 'cause the ghosts won't come till you're older. She had 3 older aunts. Uncle Guy, too, had been older, by 4 years or so, born in 1801. Always telling poor Marguerite of Brother Guy in their dreams, one afternoon, she also saw his remains. Floating up 6 inches, towering behind her aunties, Marguerite could make out his sinister face. He was much older now, much lifeless, hollow, earth-colored, vacant, but savagely growling out loud. In the yard up above her, then flew through the window pane. She went on gathering her wood for the fire. It was already cool out, even though still an autumn night. Marguerite, she put down her pack to perspire. Sleep, little baby, now, sleep while you can, 'cause the ghosts won't come until you're older. She was arching her back in a stretch when Marguerite heard the window break, a woman's cold shriek from the deep in the dark house. Leaving the pack there, she ran fast all of the way back to see what had frightened her aunties to their core. When she opened the door, they were all standing there, still as a cold autumn night catching its frost, dead in their tracks, a pot of soup tossed. Sleep, little baby, now sleep while you can, 'cause the ghosts won't come until you're older. How they despised their dead brother. He had stolen a wife, his presence a haunting one, definitely not a cure. When Marguerite returned there to collect her pack, it was all bundled up, left in a pile just outside the closed door. Marguerite's daughter, one of 6 that survived, Mary Jane, would tell her daughter Jane too. Sleep, little baby, now sleep while you can, 'cause the ghosts won't come until you're older. Sleep, little baby, now sleep while you can, 'cause the ghosts, they'll come as soon as you're older. Before the crone's death, she would smile and tell of Marguerite, who would speak of her grand-mère Nantouche. She came to Sud-Est, somewhere below the Great Lakes. Heichka.
Thanks, Madison. Really powerful. Thanks so much for sharing. So we next have Sally Scott, who I will invite to come on the stage. So Sally describes herself as sort of an actor, sort of a writer, not from Canada, and not sure where she belongs, which seems to be a theme. She has been involved with many storytelling events in Canada and the UK, and currently calls Vancouver home. In her story today, she is exploring body image and the pandemic. And I will pass it over to Sally. Oh, you just have to unmute. Oh, there we go.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Brianna. So as Brianna said, my name is Sally. I am sort of an actor and sort of a writer and sort of a Brit, and I sort of live in Canada. By which I mean I am a Brit and I do live here, but I don't know how to commit to living here. I don't know if I belong. And given these things, I was intrigued by the idea of taking part in this event, and I was going to write a story about identity and how I'm less self-conscious about my accent outside of Britain. And how do you find community when you're well over university age, but you don't have kids whose parents you can befriend? I also have a sick relative back in the UK, so I'm aware that at some point I'm going to be going back, but I don't know when, I don't know how long for. And did you know there's a pandemic going on? So I'm still working through all of my thoughts and feelings on all of these things. And my sister posted something on Facebook which made me really pissed. She was upset because she had gained weight during the lockdown in Britain. And this is what she said. I'm sat on the sofa feeling really unmotivated and quite fat as I've put on loads of weight in the last few months. All I see on Facebook is people's posts about things they've achieved or ads for some new fitness regime or diet that will change your life, and it's pissing me off. Anyone else feeling more like a chubby, lazy, tired gremlin as well, or am I on my own? Smiley face. Britain, like BC, has a very fat-phobic culture. It's assumed that everyone is trying to lose weight or unhappy with their bodies. If you eat a vegetable at work, someone will say, "Oh, that looks healthy." And if you eat a treat, someone will say, "Oh, that looks nice." And in Britain, I cycled everywhere despite not being a middle-aged man in Lycra. And I think here this is becoming more normal. However, if I'm on a dating site and I don't mention any sport, the level of interest in my profile is significantly lower than if I mention cycling. I've also noticed that many people are looking for a healthy partner. But what is healthy? And by healthy, I think they mean thin. and definitely not physically disabled. I could be wrong, but I don't think I am. I think it's also the socio-economic status of the partner that you're looking for. Health is a commodity. Fitness is a commodity. You can buy gym memberships and meal plans and ski passes and those weirdly huge vegetables in Whole Foods. You have time for exercise and money for personal trainers. It's a sign of your privilege and status. Back to my sister. So it pissed me off that in a time of a global crisis, when people are finding ways to cope with having their kids at home, with layoffs and stockpiling in the supermarkets, illness and death, and she's worried about having gained weight. But this is not her fault. We grew up watching our mother go from being a plump woman, an on-off dieter, to a non-dieter. And she started listening to her appetite. And at the same time, her mind and body began to decline. And over many years, we saw her body taken over by a neurological disease. Her body was no longer her own. And I think any positive message from her listening to her body was drowned out by these scary changes that we didn't really understand. Our mother was being held hostage in her own body. And a lot of this happened when we were teenagers and had already had years of absorbing all the cultural messages around us about bodies and what they should look like. And all of these messages were incorporated into our internal belief system, and it's really hard to turn that off. Our whole society still looks at women and expects perfection, not to mention the impact of stress on our bodies. It's a very common reaction to reach for food to help to cope with stressful situations, and there are biological reasons for this. Not that the diet and fitness industries will tell you that. They will tell you that you're not enough, that you could be fixed by using their products, by giving them money. It's very seductive. January, for example, it's not just a new year, it's time for a new you. It's a new body, a new brain, a new lifestyle. There's no such thing as a diet anymore, they're called lifestyles now. And if it's not working, stopped working, or you can't do it. Dieting creates cravings, but the diet industries won't tell you that. Dieting teaches your body to protect itself against future famines, but they also don't tell you that. And then you start to believe that you must be doing it wrong. You aren't suffering enough. No pain, no gain. If at first you don't succeed, then try again. You can do it, right? You can fight the battle, win the war, be who and how you want to be, as long as it's perfect. Bodies are not meant to be some airbrushed, flawless image. They're real. They're warm and cold, and sometimes they smell, and they lose hair, they go grey, they get wrinkly. They're designed to change and to heal. Puberty, aging, scars, recovering from surgery, and the remarkable expansion and growth as a woman grows a baby inside her and then gives birth through her vagina. How incredible is that? We have so much external chatter. People telling us what to think and feel, from advertisers to social media. There's always someone to compare yourself to, from what you're having for lunch to how to have the perfect lockdown. Now, film and TV content comes from white, middle-aged, middle-class men, and so much of it objectifies women. Older women fade out of society's media, and no one can name more than 3 female actresses over 50, because of course that's when women stop existing. So our bodies don't belong to us. They belong to everyone looking at them. From traditional media to social media, women who run magazines and friends on Facebook. So what happens during the pandemic? We're now inundated with how to cope, how to have a good pandemic, from sourdough starters to banana bread, home workouts to virtual dinners and quarantinis, how to eat if there's no food in the supermarket, Zoom meetings with filters to make me look airbrushed, can't get a haircut, online dating where you can't meet people before your ovaries give out, or unless your masked faces meet across the fruit and veg aisle. The electricity from 2 meters apart will be unmistakable. Is it hot in here, or do we have COVID? Let's get tested together. Then there's the guilt. I'm not moving as much. I've worn leggings every single day for 2 months. My energy levels have dropped. I'm working from home, living by myself. I can just put things off now. Why do it today if I can do it tomorrow? Can't get up before work for a bike ride? There's always tomorrow. I'm eating more. Am I eating more, or does it feel like I'm eating more? Did I have chocolate for breakfast? Again. Life is simple now. It revolves around food and work and video chatting. I'm getting sick of the internet. Video chatting is not the same as being able to hug your family. Without physical intimacy and affection, are we less human? A hug releases the hormone oxytocin, which relaxes us, gives us a sense of belonging and comfort. And if we can't touch each other and only communicate virtually, are we now cyborgs? Can we really feel connected to anyone now? But heaven forbid we gain weight during the pandemic. Surely there are more important things, and surely we should understand that our lives are different right now. So what happens if you say no? I want to live in my entire body. I want to be present in it and not pick it to pieces and not spend more time concerned with how other people will see it. I want to touch other people when the time comes. I want to still be human. So what happens when you say, I am enough? If I like my body, if I don't try to solve my problems by being thinner, prettier, new clothes, new hair, what happens if I concentrate on who I am and what I like? What if I consider the internal and not the external? If I exercise regularly because it feels good, because I enjoy being, and not to punish myself, not to tell myself off for eating something I shouldn't, because food is bad and fat is bad and sugar is bad, and because I am bad and I'm a really bad person for eating it. How dare I? What if what I eat is my business and my business alone? You don't need to look at my lunch and tell me how healthy it looks or how nice it looks if you think I shouldn't be eating it. I want acceptance that all bodies change when times change and there's no moral implication. And I would like everyone, particularly my sister and me, to feel like they belong in their bodies and to be enough. Whatever they look like, whatever their ability or disability, to put the diet industries out of business and to trust our own bodies to tell us what to eat and how much to eat and when they're tired and when they're full. And for everyone to feel like they belong and their bodies are home. So thank you, Brianna, for the opportunity to talk about that.
Thank you, Sally, so much. Yeah, I mean, I guess our one and only home in a way is our body. So it's really interesting developing a relationship to that and ourselves, and especially given being inundated with so many things, especially when we're in front of a screen all the time, which let me invite everyone back on camera now, and we'll give each other a round of applause because we didn't get to do that. Thank you all so very much. I just before, speaking of Zoom fatigue, we'll keep this short, but I do just want to invite, if anyone in the audience wants to raise their hand and come on screen, or so that you can be heard to ask a question or comment on anyone's story, please feel free to do that. And we'll open it up to everyone here, but I just wanted to say before we go into that and we lose anyone, I just want to give a huge thank you to Janet Munsell, who helped facilitate this whole event. She has a series that's going on and has been going on for most of the last couple months, as far as I know, called Plaything. I think you can go, I think the website is plaything.ca, and she's been doing readings of plays by, I think you can still submit, maybe she'll tell me if I'm wrong, but play readings, just keeping this going, and I just want to thank her for helping us out here, and encourage everyone to have a look at it and maybe watch a reading. I've listened to a couple, and yeah, it's amazing. The benefit of all this is having actors together from across Canada or wherever they are in the world, all in on a reading. So it's pretty cool. Yeah, maybe just opening it up to, I don't know, there's so many things to discuss, but any sort of comments from anyone, anything strike you for the storytellers? I will say when we decided on this theme, Sean and I, well, it was more me, wasn't it, Sean? I sort of forced it on you, didn't I?
I think we talked about them all, and there was a lot of fun ideas, and I think this was a good one.
Yeah,
they're all good. I think it's whatever you do. I mean, you know, I needed a lot of tissues during these stories, so I think, yeah, I'm super happy with how. I'm glad you forced it on me, if that's how it happened.
Well, I was gonna say, I mean, when we were like, let's do this during this isolation time, and I sort of thought, okay, I don't want to do anything about isolation. Like, I don't want to make that the theme kind of thing. And I was like, what is the opposite of being isolated? And I came to belonging, which, funnily enough, many people's stories and the theme is, where do I belong? And I don't feel like I belong. And so it was kind of this, not that I was trying to force anything on anyone, but my train of thought was, what's the opposite of isolation, or far from it? So just hearing that a lot of people struggle with, where do I belong? Again, I think that's why I wanted to do this. It's like, oh yeah, we're all humans just bumbling our way through, like, in these blob suits, like bouncing off people and things and trying to figure out, you know, where we're supposed to be. So yeah, I really do want to thank everyone for sharing personal stories and doing such a beautiful job of it. It's really courageous and vulnerable, and I really commend all of you. So thank you very much. And I'll open it up if anyone wants to say anything or ask anything of anyone else, any storytellers or whoever.
I'm raising my hand.
Yeah.
Well, I just like what you were just saying. I mean, I feel so thankful to be like included in something like this from so far away. I think that there's something about belonging in that that I hadn't thought about until now when we're doing it. I think it's interesting. Like I noted earlier that the theme, and you've said this too just now, that the theme seems to be that we struggle somewhere between wanting to be ourselves and then wanting to be. So we're talking into the light instead of looking and talking to you guys. The struggle between wanting to be included and wanting to feel that sense of belonging that we sort of, you know, expect or dream about, whatever, but that the struggle is, how do you stay yourself? And I hope that it's not mutually exclusive. I mean, it seems pretty obvious that it's not, because we have something like this happen where few of us have met, most of us don't know each other, and we're sitting in this experience sort of together. And doesn't that feel like belonging, right? And we're all being ourselves through it at the same time. And I just thought that was really powerful. We are so scared of getting there, but once you get there, it's so easy to express yourself. So that's my feeling anyways.
Yeah, it's funny too, like even being on here, like me, for instance, like playing host, it's like I'm relaxed a little bit more now, but like it's like I felt like I'm like, oh, I'm being fake, or I'm being stagey, or I'm being this at the top, like how I present myself in this setting and with these people. And I feel kind of I don't know what the word is. I feel, I guess it's like I owe you all for giving me your time. And so I don't know, it's been an interesting experience for me playing host and being like, I have this important thing that I want you to give up your time to be a part of, and just noticing how I am in this setting is another layer of belonging, and how we sort of adapt to where we are, I guess.
You know, I think it would have been a tremendous amount of work. Can you hear me?
Yes.
It would have been a tremendous amount of work to have pulled all of these people and all of these stories at their different levels of thoughtfulness together if we hadn't been locked down.
Yeah. Yeah. It's true.
It's the opportunity. There's a lot of opportunity here, isn't there?
It took a few months, but in the last 2 weeks, I have 1 or 2 Zoom meetings every day, and I'm loving it. But at first, honestly, it took months, like I said, and in the last few weeks, it's that feeling of part of like you're in the room with people, and there might be a barrier there at first, especially when you don't know anyone, but it doesn't take very long, I've been finding, to sort of forget that it's weird, you know? And,
yeah. Yeah, I will say this, being a creative, we're all creative is why I quote it. I have not had any desire to create anything. It's like so many people right off the bat when things happened, it was like, I'm doing this event and this and this and this, and we're doing this online. And I was just like, oh no, I'm like, so no, thank you at all. And it, you know, Sean and I have been talking about this for a while now, when we finally were like, let's set a date and did it. But it took a lot. It's like, I have felt really grateful being able to go inside. Like I needed to completely, you know, go into hermit mode a little bit for like the first 6 weeks, probably, just to connect with why I do what I do and why I want to storytell and all these things. But I needed to do that first. And yeah, it was not hard because I was pretty gentle on myself, but to see everybody doing such amazing things, I was inspired by it. But I was also just like, no, I can't, that's not for me right now. So just in the unfolding of this, having everyone agree to do it and give up their time, and maybe there was more space because we're all on this journey together in some way or another, even though we're having different experiences. It's, you know, when does the whole world experience to some degree the same thing? Like how often has that happened? So it's a pretty unique opportunity. And as you said, Marjorie, yeah, I don't know if this would have happened had it been different, right? So
this is the first quote unquote performance work I've done in over 5 years. So
yay, thank you for doing it.
Definitely would not have happened if it wasn't for this situation.
Yeah.
When the lockdown occurred, is my mic on?
Yeah, you're good.
Oh, okay. When the lockdown occurred, I think that there was an immense amount of grappling, and I could see that even from an advertising point of view, like people not knowing how to sell their products and their businesses, and even the big wigs probably took 4 weeks to really do a proper pivot, which was so I'm relating that to you saying to me that as a creative, you had, listen, if you were a singer, a songwriter, a performing artist, you'd be like, what the fuck am I supposed to do? Like all the production is shut down. All, you know, there's like, what do I do it? Like, I don't know. It would be, at least, you know, I make bread, and so it's not a hard pivot, but it would be quite challenging, I think, for a while.
I think
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I'm just like, you know, I'm one of the people that did too much, probably, or whatever. I did what I did, but you know, I leaned into, like, started doing all these things. And I was like, I'm going to make short films, and I'm going to do what I'm going to do. And I leaned into it. And I think I did that not because I felt the need to be creative, but because I didn't want to stop and think about what was happening. Because if I stopped moving, then I would have to think about what was going on in the world. And I didn't want to do that. And or I wasn't ready to do that. And then, you know, the part of it too, I just wanted to, I guess, and Brianna and I talked about it, and we're, you know, coming at it from different directions where I'm creating like new things all the time, and I am making sourdough. Thank you. I'm doing all this. And, but it's, I know I'm doing it just to cope. I know I'm doing it because I'm not ready to like sit on whatever's happening and think about how it's all impacting me. And Brianna and I talking about it, I was like, well, maybe I can think about it and maybe I can slow down. And so that's been useful. And then I just also wanted to like, I think in everyone's stories, I don't know why I did this other than it was part of that sort of frenetic creative thing where I'm like, well, let's just do stuff. I just want to do stuff. And Brianna's a person that does stuff, so I'm going to ask her to do stuff together, and we're going to like, I just want to do stuff. And so it was all part of that. But then listening to everyone talk, I found so much comfort in all of your stories because I felt like every story that all of you told resonated with me. And I felt like, I guess, when Krista, you told your story, I was like, oh, that's totally me. And Mark, when you told your story, I was like, oh, that's me. And so when everyone told their stories, I was like, huh, that's all, you're all me in a way. Not, you don't belong to me, but
There's something.
All of your stories are all part of what I've been feeling, and feeling like I just started writing theater at the age of 42 and don't really feel like I belong in theater because I don't know anything about it. I haven't seen a lot of it, and I haven't gone to school or done any training. I'm a terrible actor. I can't remember anything. But so I've like, well, do I belong here? And then I think today I'm like, well, sure, I belong wherever I am. So whatever, I think I found comfort in feeling like that. And Sally's story really brought it home that I can just belong wherever I am, and whatever I'm doing, that's where I belong. And that's probably okay. So thank you all. I just really grateful.
When I think it was Krista, right? Krista who went into mortuary business.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And that was on a level, you know, I think, I don't know about everyone else, but appealing in the sense of who doesn't do whatever they do and get to the point where they're, you know, they're making a good living at it. And at the same time, they're kind of bored the fuck out of their mind, right? They just, so the opportunity to learn something new can be quite exhilarating. And I think that was something I paid attention to with Krista's piece. And Sally's piece was brilliant, I have to say, as well. She delivers exceptionally well.
Yeah, that was beautiful. Can I just say too, though, that I think I reached peak pandemic today because I made crackers out of sourdough discard, and I used and I used my KitchenAid pasta roller to roll it out. And like, oh man, I don't know if I can get any better than this. Like, I don't know if I want the pandemic to end at this point.
You can still make crackers when the pandemic is over.
No, you really can't.
No, you can't.
No.
That's the line.
My takeaway from this is that maybe this is the way human beings are supposed to be. Maybe we're supposed to be free to schedule things when it suits us. Maybe we're supposed to be independent and creative and not have to fit into a culture of work hours and either insufficient or over-sufficient pay.
Yeah. I mean, Jonathan always says what do you say about retirement? Spreading your retirement out over your life, which is something I really like about him. But yeah, just when I kind of liked, and Sean and I talked about this, it's like, yes, there's so many things happening that are overwhelming and terrible, and it's challenging. But what this is doing is forcing everybody literally and figuratively inside. We're all, you know, whatever that means for different people. And I know that everyone's having different experiences, but forcing into your home, all of a sudden everybody's baking bread, growing gardens, building things so much more. And we're also forced inside. For me, it was like when I was finally able to slow down, and get away from that go, I got to make stuff, I got to do stuff, I got to, you know, everyone was doing all these incredible things and I was doing the opposite, but it's both, they were both going inside, if that makes sense. So I had to just like slow down and listen to my own intuition. And it took me about a month to get there, but I did. And yeah, just I guess the different forms it took in so many different people, but finding a lot of beauty and in that. I've really enjoyed seeing what people, how people have gone inside, if you will. So, yeah.
I'm a little bit sad that there's so much competitiveness in this pandemic activity.
I know, that's why I just take a back seat to that.
Yeah, there is now, but I think for the first 2 or 3 weeks, I thought that, you know, if you were looking at Instagram and you were looking at how, what passed for culture 12 weeks ago, which was, you know, like the Kim Kardashians of the world or whatever, and there's so much of that everywhere.
The
It looked
influencer.
absolutely ludicrous, absolutely ludicrous. You were like, I mean, I already thought it was ludicrous before, but now it just looks fucking stupid. It's like, yeah, it was beautiful. And I think 4 years from now, people are going to go, God, I wish there was another pandemic.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see how things, what we keep and what we go back to. It'll be very interesting to see. But I want to be conscious of time right now. So I think, yeah, just a final huge thank you to Janet, to everyone who attended, and to Sean for helping me get this going and taking over the technical side of things because I realized I can't multitask about an hour before we started. So thank you. And to the storytellers, honestly, it means so much to me that you agreed to do this and be a part of this. And as it's a first run of this, as we figure this out, and you know, there's things that I'll learn from this experience and moving forward. I just really thank you for jumping into it and being a part of it. So thank you all.
Looking beautiful, Brianna. Looking beautiful.
Oh, and I would be remiss if I didn't say, Jonathan, I loved your recollection of your life as a 10-year-old in India. It was very touching.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Thank you all very much.
Thank you all so much. And thank
Bye
you,
all.
Anna.
Bye-bye.